folks, welcome back to the Shoogly shed. Winter has definitely arrived today. It is freezing, absolutely freezing, so warm jacket and hat today. I just popped out to the shed to hopefully finish off the assembly of the top of the engine. Last time, remember, I got the cylinder head on. I hadn't done any of the timing or anything with the camshafts. I off camera went ahead and just checked all the camshafts, inspected them, checked the oil clearances and things like that, so we should be good to go. And I've also got the camshaft cover all painted up and we're good to go. So really it is just assemble the camshafts onto the timing chain and check all the timing. Let's do it.
Here we have the camshafts. They've all been checked, the lobes measured, the ends and all that all measured up. Checked everything on these, including the oil clearances on the journals at the end with the plastic gauge again. Next thing to do is to pop them on the head with the chain and put the journals down and make sure it's all timed up correctly using the timing marks on the end of the crankshaft here. So on this type of head you've got these valve followers or buckets that go in like this over the top of the valves. And there are shims or spacers that sit in these, and the different thicknesses of spacers is how you determine your valve clearance. So these are going in first. So buckets are all in place now. Next thing to do is to decide what spacers to put in. So I'm going to check the valve clearances, the specifications for them, and put in roughly close to the right sizes to get the clearances between the cam lobes. And then I'll check the valve clearances again once I've finished doing all the timing, and then I can do some fine adjustments.
Now that everything's aligned, next thing to do is to put on the caps onto the journals. Now the cam chain tensioner. So I've held the screwdriver in place whilst mounting it, and that's held the plunger back. When I release the screwdriver, the plunger will push forward and automatically tension the cam chain to the appropriate tension. Pretty smart. Just like that. And the engine turns over quite nicely. No resistance, only when it's going up its compression stroke. Lovely, happy with that.
So the next job is to do the valve clearances. Though unlike some bikes that have adjustable valve clearances, this one, the way to adjust it is using different sized shims on the valve buckets. So you measure your gap, measure your shim, see if the gap is right, and then if it's not right you get a bigger shim or a smaller shim depending on if you need to widen or narrow your gap. So under here is the shim I'm talking about. The gap needs to be between 0.03 and 0.08 millimeters. You probably want to be on the top end of that spec for the exhaust valves because they get hotter and expand a bit more, and somewhere in the middle to lower region on the intake valves, just to make sure your intakes are opening fully, but your valve is also shutting correctly. So measuring these gaps, because they're so small, the best way to do it is using a feeler gauge. If you don't know what a feeler gauge is, it is just different strips of metal that are different widths and thicknesses, and using this you can determine how big the gap is by sliding a gauge in. So in the GS500 engine you need to rotate the crankshaft round to line up the right timing mark here in between this point here, and that means you can now measure this gap, and this gap, and then in order to measure that one you need to turn the engine over 180 degrees. This one can't even slide my smallest gauge under there, so this is telling me this gap is far too small, and I'm having the same issue over here that won't go in there. So I need to get thinner shims to go into these buckets. This one over here, the gap is much bigger and I can slide that in really easily, so I'm going to step it up to a bigger gauge and see if I can figure out just how big that gap really is. So I can really tightly squeeze a 0.1 in there. That's probably on the upper end. The 0.09 slides in much more easily. So I'm round about the tolerance there. I did say I want to keep the tolerance wider on the exhaust side because they do heat up and expand a bit more. So I'm quite happy with that gap. I'm not going to worry about that one. I do need to fit smaller shims into these two here. So how do we get these shims out? Well, you're using a special little tool. I picked this up online for less than a tenner. You can fashion your own if you hate yourself, but you might as well just spend the money and get one that actually works well. It slides in under the camshaft there, and when you turn it down it presses on the valve bucket, pushes the bucket down without putting any pressure on the shim, and you can just lift the shim out using a magnet. Simple. Well, it's taken a while because of the Royal Mail just now, but we have new valve spacers, so let's get these open and get them into the head. Okay, new spacers in, and we've got our clearance. That slides in nice and smoothly, a wee bit of contact, absolutely perfect, happy with that. So that should be all our valve spacings done. This one was in spec, this one's in spec, this one's in spec, and this one's in spec. So pretty much the next job is to put the valve cover on with a fresh gasket, and then the breather, and then we're done. Hey hey! Well, here it goes. Sounds good to me, what do you think? Nothing crunchy, that's always a good sign. Okay, we're straight up to 145 psi there, that's bang in spec, lovely. And we're just under 140 there. That's fine. So we pulled up about 145 in one cylinder, about 140 in another. We've got standard is 142 to 199. I want to see a GS500 get to 199 psi. That seems a bit ludicrously high. However, we're towards the lower end of the range, but frankly, like the minimum is like 114. So yeah, I'm well above that, so I'm happy with that. Plus, like I say, the engine's not bedded in yet; it's not worn in, so there's a good chance that the compression will increase as the valves seat properly into their seats and bed in a little bit more. They've all been lapped, as I say. The whole engine obviously has had an overhaul, so the compression will increase as parts wear into each other and the valves seat properly. I will need to check the valve clearances again when that happens. However, for right now, I am pretty happy with that spec, reaching around about 145 in one, 140 in the other. You can't really beat that. So yeah, I'm not worrying at all about that.
So that completes the GS500 engine rebuild. It's been a long road, a lot of learning, a lot of getting my hands dirty and finding things out the hard way. However, we're there. We've got a finished engine. Did the compression test, as you saw. Quite happy with those values just now. Nothing's screaming out at me that anything's wrong, so really pleased with that. That kind of makes me feel like I've actually done a decent job. I will only really know when the engine starts for the first time, so I can't wait for that. But there's a lot of other stuff to do before then. What I hope people take away from this series in particular, the engine rebuild, is that, I don't have a background in mechanics really. It's just a hobby. Never served an apprenticeship or anything. I just wanted to learn, and I did it by trying things out. And I made mistakes, and there are things I could have done better, and I could have done it faster if I was a professional. However, we're there. The end goal is to have a rebuilt engine, and we have that. Everything, no stone had been left unturned to this engine, so I'm really, really chuffed to say that. I didn't skimp on anything, so hopefully this engine will have a really good service life left to go on it. There is a lot more to do on this bike build, but I've ticked off a huge job refurbishing the engine, completely rebuilding it. So I can breathe a sigh of relief, and I can go and have a beer and look forward to the day I get this engine to fire up for the first time and take it for a ride. So I am so looking forward to that. Anyway, I think this might have been a bit of a long episode, but hopefully you stuck with it, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the videos in the engine rebuild series. Give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the Shoogly Shed YouTube channel for the upcoming videos as I progress to get this GS500 finished. And obviously all the previous episodes are there as well. Have a good Christmas and New Year, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.